There are passings in the sports world that are always difficult to deal with. Players that you loved, players that you idolized, players that meant a lot to you. Or maybe they died too young, too soon, and that kind of throws you off your center of balance. But the passing of Bill Walton really affected me more than other passings of the sports world have. And I didn't know him personally, but I did interview him once, and there was a certain magic that he had that really made me sad when I heard the news that Bill Walton had passed away. So I want to talk about that here and why Bill was much more special to so many people than I think even he realized. Before we get there, just a reminder to subscribe to the channel by clicking on this button below me. That way you'll get notifications, be amongst the first to know when we do things like this, like a DA Deep Dive. And then also when we go live on Sunday nights for Watch DA Live right here on YouTube. Make sure you subscribe to the channel to make sure you are one with the community, with the D-Aliens. I interviewed Bill Walton at the 2017 Final Four, one time only. And it was such an interesting experience. This was on Radio Row at the Final Four, and so there's a number of radio stations set up, and it was at a convention center where there was a fan fest going on. When we had Bill Walton scheduled, his PR person brings him over, and of all the things, Bill Walton has roadies. Kind of like the same way he was a Grateful Dead roadie, he had a throng of fans that were following him from media spot to media spot. So it was wild to do a show and then do a radio interview and have a group of people slide in just to see the interview and then slide out when the interview was over. He was making them laugh throughout the entire day. Every spot that he did, I'm sure he was charming them and talking to them along the way. And it was just so impressive to see him kind of walk through a convention hall in a media center with a group of people, a gaggle of people, super fans kind of circling him. Also, Bill Walton, remember, had tons of foot and leg issues, hip issues and back issues. They brought Bill Walton his own chair. That's right, Bill Walton didn't sit in a chair like you or I. Bill Walton, one of the greatest big men ever, earned his own chair. So he sits down, he's got his tie-dye shirt on. I remember I had this whole host of questions I wanted to ask him about his life and his career in UCLA and the Blazers and the championship and all these things. And I introduced him, and he just took it and ran with it. Oh, so good to be here, Damon. DA, it's an honor and a pleasure. He didn't know me from a hole in the wall, I don't think. But he acted like it was such a huge deal for him to be on the show. That told you a little bit about why he connects to people in a different way. Because I don't think it was inauthentic. I don't think he was just putting on a show just to put on a show. I think he felt a certain reverence to people who would listen to him speak. And he knew how to make people feel important and loved. The second thing was, I asked him one question. One solitary question. And he took it and ran with it. Oh, let me tell you about the Pac-12. It's the Conference of Champions. And he went on and on and on and on. No exaggeration. The interview lasted 16 minutes. I'll never forget this. 16 minutes. I asked him one question.
His educational model, and they are the host university.
Weren't we talking about basketball?
Well, we're going to get to basketball in a minute. Basketball is a
right.
part of all this.
Okay.
Our first stop this morning was at the Inkopah Desert View Tower, and it was so spectacular. We stood there, the wind is just howling, blowing in our face, and then we started coming down through the canyons, and the wildflowers, and the cactus, and the saguaros, and the choyas, and the ocotillos, and the mesquite trees, and then the Palo Verde trees just resplendent in the yellow bloom. It was just spectacular. And then the wildlife that we saw, rattlesnakes, lizards, iguanas, pterodactyls. It was absolutely over the top beautiful. And then as we came across the Sonoran Desert,
Tell me more.
And we saw this big white mushroom sitting right out there in the far distance, and it was the University of Phoenix Stadium, where the history of the world will be determined.
He could just spin a yarn. He could just get on the soapbox and just go. The stream of consciousness was just so incredible. He could talk about anything. He could talk about absolutely anything. I believe there was some type of discussion of dinosaurs and pterodactyls, but I couldn't tell you because there was such a flourish. It was like a Grateful Dead poster. There was colors and shapes popping up everywhere, animals and dancing bears and pterodactyls and basketballs, and that's who Bill Walton was. And I think there's something really important to be learned from Bill. Number one, joy and appreciation. No matter what Bill Walton did, he seemed like he was overjoyed to do it. Like this game between Washington State and Arizona in the middle of the night on ESPN was the biggest game that he had ever called. You're like, this is just a January Pac-12 basketball game, but man, did he act like this was the biggest deal ever. And when he met me, he acted like it was the biggest deal ever. When he did anything, he acted like it was the biggest deal ever. And when you do that and you just exude this joy, people become inspired by it. People are beaten down quite a bit. And here's Bill Walton lovingly walking around, just enchanted by life, by opportunities, by people. And boy, if you could bottle that up, if you could jar that up, store that, use that, taste it, just lick it once a day, once a month, maybe once a year. How different could your life be? But here's the other lesson, is that joy that just seemed to be pouring out of him at all times, that was not always who Bill Walton was. Those abilities to just go off and speak extemporaneously and just have such confidence that there's a roving band of superfans traveling with him to listen to him speak at a convention center outside of Phoenix. That wasn't always Bill Walton. He grew up with a terrible stutter. He was humiliated by his stutter. He was humiliated by his inability to articulate words and sentences and thoughts. And he was constantly in a battle with depression after injuries hit him. He's always been an incredible, thoughtful guy. He was one of the most socially conscious, politically conscious college athletes ever, and challenged convention back in the 70s when a player was just supposed to listen to what good old John Wooden or his head coach had to say and just do it. And he butted heads with John, and he butted heads with that administration. He was always a bit of a flower child, a free thinker. And when he succumbed to the foot injuries, all of that thought and all of those wheels that turned in his mind, those started being used for bad things. He overthought the inability to play basketball. He overanalyzed what it meant to have his whole life stripped away from his identity. He couldn't be a basketball player. Trust in the doctors, the medical system, the people that were employed to help him, to treat him, to repair him when he was damaged. He lost that faith. He didn't know who to trust, and he sank into a real pit of depression for many years, especially when he moved from the Blazers to the Clippers, and he was trying to kind of find his way through a stint where he didn't play 3 full seasons out of 4 years. 3 out of 4 years, lost completely to injury in the middle of his prime after reaching his pinnacle in Portland as the MVP of the league and an NBA champion. And then he found that joy again by going to Boston and playing on that 86 Celtics team that is widely considered one of the greatest teams ever. And Bird and McHale and all those guys made him realize how much he loved basketball again. And that rejuvenated him. And then he started using that as a springboard to find joy in everything else in his life. And it wasn't always easy, but I think about Bill Walton in these terms. If you battle with being down, or you battle with an insecurity, or you battle with mistrust, or there's just things that start becoming a cloak, a hood over your eyesight, over your head, and you're trying to make your way through, but it's always kind of hanging down and blocking your vision. Maybe you feel heavy, maybe you feel tired, maybe you just feel beaten down. No, the Bill Walton used 2 things that were completely foreign to him. The gift of gab, he didn't have that. And overwhelming joy and gratitude, he didn't have that. And flipped paralyzing fear over his weakness into a strength, a stutter into being able to speak 16 minutes based on 1 question, if that. And he went from depression and distrust and darkness to joy and appreciation and gratitude. It's not an overnight journey, but Bill Walton thrust himself into new things and challenges and didn't care that other people might think he was cuckoo. I mean, some of the stuff that he has said during basketball games is completely disconnected from the basketball game itself. But in his mind, he went for it. Why were we talking about pterodactyls and dinosaurs in the middle of a Final Four interview? I have no idea, but he went for it. And he commanded that moment because he was so confident that what came out of his mouth and his heart was good. And it was.
And for what the Conference of Champions has done for my life, I am truly the luckiest guy in the world. And what is happening right now in the Valley of the Sun, where do you live?
New York City.
Oh, another truck stop out there, please. So,
and I just think that if you are in a tough spot or have some type of paralyzing insecurity, Bill Walton's such a good example that you can flip those things 180 degrees and they could eventually become your strength. And man, how empowering is that? And that's why when he passed away, it hurt more than any player or coach or sports figure usually does. It's because there was something about Bill Walton that was just about joy. There was something about Bill Walton that just radiated happiness and appreciation. And when you lose that from a person, it's almost like a light goes out. And man, it's a bummer when the light goes out. We always have Bill Walton clips, and I'll always have the memory of him on this show. But to not have him doing a February game in the Pac-12 in the middle of the night on ESPN it's going to be weird. And it's going to be a loss, and there's a void there. But we can all live a little bit like Bill Walton by embracing the adventure, turning weaknesses into positives, just thrusting ourselves into something, and knowing that it's going to be good. That's going to wrap it up for this edition of a DA Deep Dive. Remember to subscribe to the channel by clicking on this button right next to me and leave a comment below about maybe your favorite comment about Bill Walton or how he made you feel or your favorite memory involving the big man. Could be basketball-wise. I mean, he was one of the greatest college basketball players ever. Thanks so much for watching, everybody. Appreciate it very much. I'm DA, Damon Amendolara. We'll see you Sunday nights live for Watch DA Live on this YouTube channel. See you next time.